I was the youngest of 4 children. My father was a Christian minister in the South in America. And my very best friend when I was a young child, was my grandfather, Dr. Garland Clark. He was my mother's father from Kentucky. He was a surgeon. He was my favorite person in the world. We spoke all the time. He read me stories. He took me places. He did so much. He was my closest companion. The only interesting catch was that Judge died when I was 1. And my parents, my father in particular, was just going crazy because I would come in and I would talk about what Judge, that was our nickname for him, what Judge and I had just done, what Judge had just told me. And there were things that as a 4-year-old I was telling my parents that there's no way I could have known unless Judge had actually told me himself. So now my father's beginning to realize, oh, so she sees dead people. That's kind of how it all began. So my poor parents kind of led a life waiting for the shoe to drop. There was always going to be, little me runs into the room and I said, you know, Mr. Jones up the road's going to die next Tuesday. And Mr. Jones did die next Tuesday. So we had a lot of that going on. And one of my first real memories of an out-of-body experience, I had had them earlier on, and you know, they didn't have a name, so I didn't know what I was doing. I was just flying around. And so I remember being out, and the perspective is very different because you're turning back and looking at yourself. But the only view you've ever had of you is what you've seen on a camera or what you've looked at in the mirror. And I can tell you, when you step outside of the mortal coil and you're looking back at yourself, you're like, wow, you know, this is so weird. And it was interesting because the very first time that I actually started traveling outside of the body was with my grandfather, Judge. He would introduce me to people, but these people were no longer alive in our story. They were certainly well alive in wherever he was, in that space between. Because when I would get these visits and I would go traveling out of body with my grandfather, when I would see him and he would be in front of me, he looked flesh and blood to me. Was he a hologram? Was he some kind of digital projection from some other realm? I don't know. All I know is that as a child, he looked real, and these places that we went were real. And there were sometimes I would see things and then visit them years later. And there's where the verification came in. You know, I would go, oh my gosh, I remember being taken to this place. My mom's going, no, you didn't. You never were brought here as a child. So it could be upsetting sometimes because as I got a little older, I began to realize that everybody else didn't see the world this way. And so I spent my teenage years, my awkward teenage years, with this amazing gift and did everything I could to kind of shy away from having the experiences because I wanted to be like the other kids. And so I graduate from college in communications and graphic design, and I moved to Charleston, South Carolina. So it was December 14th, 1991, and I was on my way to my company Christmas party. I jumped in my trusty little Toyota Corolla and left my apartment, and I came down a road and I got to a major highway, which is called Highway 17. So I get to the light, my light was red, and it stayed red for a while, and then my light turned green, and I had to cross all the way over the traffic coming this way to make the left to go towards town. Well, I made it across the first couple of lanes, and then all of a sudden I looked, and I can see this car barreling towards me. And this is where everything changed. Time just slowed down almost to a complete stop. And I looked left, and I just went, oh, I'm getting ready to die. It was just very matter of fact, because all of a sudden in that moment with everything creeping, you know, when a car is coming at you at a snail's pace, you know, you're not really worried about the impact it's getting ready to make. I look at this and I go, oh, I've done this before. Oh my gosh, I've done this before. Okay, how do you want to do this, kiddo? You know, I can stay in the body and experience the impact and then die, or I can go out of the body, watch the accident take place, and watch the body die. Which one? So I took option B. So what was so fascinating at this point was the sound. I hear this drone. It's this a low drone. That's the closest sound that I can equate what happened when I was coming out of the body. And remember, low does not mean bad. Low means low frequency. The low vibe was what was keeping my being, my essence, my soul tethered to the physical form. And so that low drone comes in, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is happening. I'm getting ready to die. And suddenly I realize, oh gosh, I've done this so many times before, and there's no fear. It was a very matter of fact, this is happening. And I felt very in charge and very in control of the situation. It wasn't like, oh my God, I'm too young, I'm only 21, I have so much life to live. And so I'm coming up and out of the body, and the best way I have ever found to describe that is if someone was outside and they were doing lawn work, or they were out in the sun and they were hot and they were sweaty, and they came inside and they peeled off those dirty, nasty clothes and they threw them next to the washing machine, and they went up and had the best shower ever, and they're washing all the muck and the dirt and the grime off. The last thing they're thinking about is the clothes next to the washing machine. And so when you come up and out of the body, the last thing you're thinking about is that physical form. It's just a vehicle that the real you, has been using to traverse this particular lifetime. But we're so critical of the physical form because so often while we're here and we're deeply immersed in the experience, we identify as the physical form. And what happened in that moment was I suddenly remembered again. Everything just started coming back at lightning speed. And I remembered, oh my gosh, I'm not that body. That body is just how I've been getting around. So I am now up and out, and everything is still going in slow motion. That sound is still wafting through the air in the background. And now, when I have this bird's eye view and I'm able to look down at the accident, boom, everything just goes back to normal speed again. And I watch this old man plow into the side of my car, and I am literally spectating my own death. I watch my head go through the window, my neck breaks. I am pinned to the seat of the car, the seat folds up, glass is going into my legs, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. There was no sense of mourning or trying to get back into the body really quick. No, I'm dying. It just wasn't like that because I wasn't dead. The body was dying. I was perfectly great and intact, and suddenly becoming a whole hell of a lot smarter than I'd been 5 seconds earlier. Because all of my memories, the veil of forgetfulness that you have to have in order to come here and immerse into this experience is suddenly pulled off. So I am now looking down. Cars are screeching to a halt. 2 cars behind me at that stoplight was a girl that I had shared the dorm with when I was in college. She watched the entire accident take place. So here I am out of body, and I can suddenly feel her recognizing me and the vehicle. And I could feel her pain, I could feel her terror, and it was so funny because it was hers, not mine. She was the one who was attached to the death, not me. And I was like, oh my gosh. And it's like you want to shake everybody. You want to run around and tell everybody that you can. Guys, it's just like walking through a door. There's nothing to be afraid of here. It's like coming in and kicking your shoes off. You don't care about the shoes anymore. The real you is still walking around the house in your bare feet. Those were just shoes. And it's the most incredible sensation. It was one of absolute elation. I remember why I came here. I remember who I am. I remember what's happening. And I'm like bathing in this light. It was like it was in me. Well, that's a little bit what that's like on steroids, It's this feeling of being a complete and utter part of the atmosphere around you, of knowing all of a sudden, oh, this is what eternal feels like. This is what I am part of everything feels like. But the best part is, you've just come out of the human form, and you're like, oh my God, I still know who I am. What a relief. All of a sudden I'm in this space realizing, oh my gosh, none of that is real. What's real is me right now. So I look dead. I'm laying there, broken. I watched the old roommate's reaction, but then I stayed around long enough and I saw the ambulance arrive. And there was this guy in a uniform. He came up. He reached through, because all the windows had blown out of the car, and he reached through the passenger side and he turned the ignition off. Well, I realized that this was the policeman that was the first to arrive on the scene. And there was this lady, and I can remember her so well. And she was either on her way somewhere else or she didn't really want to get involved. But I remember her writing down her phone number and her name, walking up to the car. Now imagine doing this. You've got like a dead person in the car, and you walk up and you leave your name and phone number on the passenger seat just in case anybody needs to chat. Well, next thing, all of a sudden, the sound begins to change. So we go from this kind of wah-wah, low drone sound to this more beautiful orchestral, I call it the music of the spheres, this symphony of sounds that don't sound like any kind of music that we have here. So I can't even really adequately describe it to you because I've never been able to hear it here or recreate it here. And it's now changing with my vision and my experience. So that lower drone that I said was kind of keeping me tethered to the body is now exchanged for this higher sound. And now I'm no longer at the scene of the accident. In this new space that I arrived in, it was so wild because it was like the atmosphere was palpable. It was like I was part of the atmosphere that was around me. And here's what's really interesting. So long gone is my fear that, you're dead and cease to exist. I'm like, I am tangible. I am something. I even had this feeling of a sense of form. I wasn't just like some blob of light and love floating around. I felt like I had texture and shape. And so as I'm in this space, and I cannot tell you how long that actually was, I don't know. But the atmosphere all at once began to kind of take shape in front of me. And so it was like something was starting to form out of this texture around me. That when these shapes started taking form in front of me, they came in the form of two elderly gentlemen. It was like, I know these guys, but I can't remember how I know them. And they just waited. And they waited patiently. And then all of a sudden, it was like all the light bulbs went off at once. And I was like, oh my gosh, these are my guides. And everybody has guides. They're with you from the dawn of your existence. And what's so amazing is that, we fool ourselves into thinking when we're here in this earth plane that we can get dark and we can get low and that we're alone. You're never, ever alone. It's this sense of being encompassed in someone who knows you, your real history, someone who knows who you are, what your mission was, what you decided to come into the earth realm in the first place, why this was important to you, and they know your story. They're always there to love and guide and support you. So these were my two who knew me, the real me, and they were there to welcome me into this space because, look, you've just died. And while it's all wonderful how it's unfolding, it is a bit of a shock when you're coming out of the earthly realm because it's dense here, y'all. It is dark, and that's how this realm is set up. Earth is this dichotomy of darkness and light. This is a space unlike any other where you can come in and you could have just lost the love of your life. And the following day, there is a birth of someone precious to you. And you can feel this utter elation and the deepest sorrow simultaneously. That's what the dichotomy of dark and light means. That's why Earth is such an unusual schoolhouse. This realm is set up to provide experiences to learn, grow, and evolve within the dichotomy. But we waste so much time trying to say it to change the circumstances rather than to change ourselves within them. That's the big cosmic ha-ha. That's what people have missed. That's probably one of the biggest lessons that I took back from having been dead. The next thing that happened, I'm still surrounded by that sound, is my environment changes around me. And so picture yourself standing in an IMAX theater. And this is the next spot where everything I thought I knew to be true got turned on its ear. I am watching my life unfold, and this is that proverbial life review that we hear people speak of. But what's so interesting is you're suddenly going, oh my God, this isn't happening in linear time. I'm 11 years old getting my first English bulldog called Otto von Bismarck, and I'm beside myself with joy because I've been waiting for this dog forever. I'm 17 years old over here, and I'm drinking too much at a college party. I am 12 years old here dressed as P.T. Barnum, and I am winning Living History Day in my middle school. So not only am I standing here and my complete and utter definition of what time and space and reality are literally imploding in front of my very eyes, I am standing in awe going, I am all of these things and none of these things all at the same time. I was in utter disbelief. I was in awe. And so one of the amazing things is right before I came back into the body, and I just had this incredible experience of watching time melt in front of my face and realizing that that's not even real. It's a man-made construct to give us some kind of template through which to work through life. What I also realized is that the guides that were there with me, the whole time that we're in communication, nobody's mouth is moving. This is something where we are just knowing each other. We're sitting in the space and there is, if you want to call it telepathic, whatever, but there was just a knowing, this communication between us where no words had to be spoken. I often find in dream time and in out-of-body experiences, this is the same way that communications will take place quite often as well. I'm looking around and I've just gone through this review of my own life, and I was like, wait a second. I was told in the Southern Baptist Church that there was going to be a judgment. And guess what, guys? Nobody was judging me but me. I was critiquing my performance. I didn't realize this tiny little thing that I had done had made such a huge impact over here. I was watching and critiquing my own performance, but with such love, as if you're watching someone who's not you, because it's actually only a piece of you. And so as these beings and I are kind of communicating with one another, when I was coming back, they said to me that they were going to have to set the bar a little higher. I was going to come back as if I wasn't weird enough with some new gifts. And so I crashed back into my body at lightning speed, back into a body that was completely broken. And when I finally awakened in the ER, in the hospital, and I didn't even realize my neck was broken, and this man walks into the room, and he was wearing a uniform, and he had a little notebook. And then all of a sudden I realized, hey, I know you. And he kind of tilted his head and he was like, no. I said, I do. You were at the accident. And he's like, how could you know that? You were the one who reached in and you turned the engine off. Now he's freaking. And I was like, did you check with my roommate? She was a couple of cars behind me. And he's kind of inching back away from me, right? What is actually happening right now? I said, there was this strange lady that came up and put her name and phone number on the passenger side of the car. She reached in through and left it on the seat. Did you get that? Did you get in contact with her? Now he's closing the little notebook and he's looking at me and he's just his eyes are full of tears, and he is like, there is no way you could know this. And it was that moment where you could hear a pin drop, because he was realizing something and I was realizing something at the same time. I just sat there with my mouth hanging open. I had no other words. And he's backing out of the room going, what is actually happening right now? Because he was the one who saw the dead body. He was the one who called the ambulance. I have now awakened and told him everything from a bird's eye view that there's no way I could have seen. We meet every night, always have, every single day. And when my grandfather appeared to me, this apparition appears in front of me and is giving me information about something that's going to happen in my perceived future. So now imagine now you're 22 years old, you've been dead, you come back and you've got to go integrate into the world again. My dead grandfather pops up and he says to me, hey, we're sending you to chiropractic school. And I was like, I had just graduated from college. I was not going back to school. But he said, we're sending you back to school because you need to understand life from a vitalistic philosophy. And I'm like, I don't even know what that means. You have just experienced the interaction of the mind, the body, and the spirit, and you have just learned firsthand that one does not exist without the other. Okay? So you're going to go and you're going to get an education about how the mind and the body and the spirit cannot be separated in order to have a complete human experience. This body is here to serve you, and when you don't fear death, you don't forget that your body is perfectly capable of serving your soul's purpose. And, it's really exciting to me right now as this kind of knowledge begins to unfold and people start to wake up and realize that we're so much more than the old meat suit. You're never alone, ever. You might think you are, and your experience might take you into the bottom of the barrel. And what you've got to realize is that's of your own doing. And that nudge that you get, that feeling that pulls you out of a state of hopelessness, that little, come on, you can do it. When you don't feel like getting up and putting one foot in front of the other, that's the help you're getting from outside. That can come in the form of a guide. There are so many different ways that you can be influenced. It's just about practicing and listening. It's available to each and every one of us. It's about keeping that channel open and allowing yourself to hear. It's like the radio station could be playing that song and it's traveling across the waves, no problem. But you could be driving down a backcountry road with poor reception. That doesn't mean that the tower's not sending the signal. It means that your capacity to receive the signal is altered because of your location. Well, your physical, emotional state of being can be altered as well, meaning that you are not receiving the signals. And so it's essential that people clean and clear. This is where frequency can come in. So, like 852 hertz, it's like an internal GPS. 852 allows you to connect to your higher self. And guess who's hanging out with your higher self? Any other higher selves that are there to help assist you. 528 hertz resonates with human DNA. You're dealing with an illness, you can sit in that frequency and alter the state of your actual physical DNA. So you have the same capacity to heal and to connect with that loving guidance as anybody else. So I always say to people, it's important to give fear and anxiety a voice, but never a vote. But a lot of people will stop me at that stage and go, why on earth, if a soul is coming from this space of love and light and perfection and awesomeness, why would you come here for that? I say it's simple. It's giving you the chance to work through and express these emotions that are native to we as human beings. And so ask anyone who's ever put a cord around their ankle and bungee jumped off a bridge, why in the hell would you do that? And they're like, because it's a rush. It's exhilarating. It's amazing. And it's not something that a beautiful, omnipotent, eternal soul that's not encompassing a physical body, that's not something they can do. We crave these experiences. You might not remember this in the physical. You might not remember this with your regular conscious mind. But that eternal, omnipotent soul that you really are, who knows that nothing and no one can harm who you really are, I need to experience this in order to grow, to move, and to evolve into the being that I want to be. And sometimes experience is uncomfortable. Sometimes the body gets sick. But what people don't realize is these bodies, these programs, these experiences that we have are here showing up for us. So the body is perfectly calculated to let you know when you're screwing up, to let you know when you're off target, to let you know that your goal that you've set for yourself is over here and you have veered off track. You're giving too much of your time and attention away to somebody else or something else or some stress or some worry, You need your undivided attention right now. And if the only way you are going to listen to yourself is for me to smack you and give you a little disease to contend with, to bring all of your time and attention and energy back to yourself. But we've made that the enemy, and the reason we make that the enemy or the uncomfortable experiences is because we fear death. And so the whole reason for my being, the whole joy that I have in coming back into this world and spending the last 33 years telling people how amazing it is to die. One of the things I'm asked most often is when people look at the state of the world right now, and they're like, this is the worst time in history. No, it's not. Every point in humanity has had moments like these. And these are essential to the human experience. And I want people to remember that, because when they're fearful of the state, oh my God, but what are my children growing up into? Well, you know what? Imagine my mom, who was born in 1929 and was a teenager moving into World War II. Imagine what she would have thought when she looked at the world. They've just exploded a nuclear bomb. Nobody knows what's happening. Everybody's freaking out. Well, guess what? You go back in history, and there isn't going to be a time in history where everything was all rosy here. It's just not the way that this plane is set up, and you need to try and remember that you're here to make the best of the experience that we're having now. You are in a playground, a schoolhouse of immense opportunity to improve and better yourself. And I'll remind you, you know what? You want to keep it real? Call BS on yourself. When you hear yourself saying something, doing something that you know is not in alignment with who you want to become, then call yourself out. Don't wait for somebody else to do it. Change tact and do something different. That's how we regain control when we feel completely helpless, when we feel at a loss, when we feel like the world is crumbling around us. So many people live in that really sick cycle. And so what I encourage you to do is to inject everything, infuse every moment with gratitude. It really does work. I know it sounds trite, and it's like, oh yeah, there's the gratitude again. But when you stay in a place of gratitude, it is so hard for you to get pulled into that negativity, for you to get pulled into that darkness, because we're surrounded by that. But like I said, you're not meant to set up camp there. You're meant to go in, experience it, visit it, and leave it again. But people will hook onto and identify with something that feels low, feels bad, feels horrible. And so I think it's really, really important that you step into each moment with gratitude. So just go do it.